first of all, of course, maybe your entire career is around what it means watching a movie, what it means, seeing a story with images going on. And I think it's really something very contemporary nowadays. And I would like to know something about your opinion around what is going on, in the movie art in itself.
Lots of people think that maybe the 1960s were a golden age or the 1990s were a golden age, and now cinema is going downhill. The best period is over. And I think something like the opposite, Mauro. I think that cinema is really young. It's Are you translating this into Italian or not?
I don't know.
Do you need it translated into Italian?
Do you need translation? No. Okay.
You sure? Okay. Do anyone need translation into Italian? Louisa? No?
No.
Okay. Okay. So I think cinema is in its adolescence. It's one of the youngest art forms, and therefore it's still got most of its life ahead of it. So that's the first thing. Obviously, you're right that there's lots of technological change, in terms of how we shoot films, and also crucially how we watch films, and the availability of cinema. It's a click away. So that affects things at one level, but at a deeper level, I think that the profound properties of cinema have not changed at all. This kind of ambiguity between reality and dream, between Lumière and the magic filmmakers of the earliest days, Méliès, for example. Those two properties are still what excites about cinema, that it's both realistic and dreamlike, that it's safe and dangerous, that it's a proxy experience. These things are the same. And so, the technology has changed, the surface of it has changed, the icing on the cake has changed, but the cake hasn't.
I wanted as well to go back to the story of film. I think you have done a very precious cultural operation.
Grazie.
Because you read the story of cinema not from a global point of view, but from a local, I think, point of view. And that is what we need also to understand our contemporary times, because you found out the best expression of cinemas also in country that our culture normally doesn't consider.
Sí.
And I wanted to ask you if you think that we need also this kind of culture also in other kind of arts and other reflections as from our point of view, Europe and the United States have been very tied together in their history during the last 70 years. Almost we forgot that there were other parts of the world.
Yes.
We need new keys to read the contemporary times.
Yeah, I passionately believe that. Borders are the enemy of art. Whether it's national borders or gender borders or class borders, these are cinema is an art form sans frontières, without borders, and this is crucial. It's also, cinema is anarchic, it's androgynous, it really has, when you look at Charlie Chaplin was an image, an icon, an idea for the whole planet, or most of the planet. So when I made Story of Film, and I wrote the book Story of Film 18 years ago now. When I wrote that, I thought, I don't want another history of cinema written by white, English-speaking European men, and I am all of that, That's why there's loads of Africa in there, that's why there's loads of Iran and Taiwan, and that's why there are lots of women directors in there, because we know that cinema has been made by everyone. So that was, and your question is, does that apply to the other art forms? I think that's, in a way, yes. Music is a global art form. painting in many ways is a global art form, but cinema is particularly good at dealing with the kind of mythic properties of life. You know, the dreams and fears, the sense of escape and rapture, etc. And these are species-wide things, you know. Every human being on the planet has dreams and fears and desire to escape. Obviously, there are cultural differences. Like, I notice them when I'm here in Bologna. There are big cultural differences between Scotland and Italy, for example. But these are, you know, secondary or tertiary issues. The primary issues, the things that cinema can really connect to, the profound things, are pretty universal, I think.
I want to keep on the story of film as well, and I felt like I was doing, you know, a trip when I was watching the movie. And what is amazing is that, you know, you are able like to put all these different movies together and to give a theme.
Yes.
So it's kind of, you know, you guide us, you know, in this travel, you can say. So I was wondering, how did you actually choose the movies to do this path?
Well, first thing for me is the structure. I need to get the structure. I've made story of film, which is 16 hours. Women make film, which is 15 hours, you know. So to make something that big, you need a structure. And I always scribble the structure down on pieces of paper like this. So the new film here, New Generation, that's this, you know, a scribble. You know, and it's not on a computer. It's just, it's like children's drawings, etc. Once you've got the structure, then you are free to play within the structure. And to answer your specific question of how I choose individual scenes, I first of all look at a map of the world and think, you know, I look at Ethiopia. Have I seen many films from Ethiopia? If not, why not? I inform myself, you know. Have I seen, I remember when I first saw the films of Elvira Notari, I thought, you know, have I seen a woman director in Italy in the 20s, 30s? No. So I looked to see if there are any. So once I know that I'm not missing out too many big pieces of the jigsaw, then it's quite simple in a way. I ask, what is the best or the standalone scene in that film? If I take, what scene can I take out of a film that will explain itself without me having to tell you the whole story? You know, if you're only seeing that bit and not the rest. So this idea of the standalone scene, the extractable moment, is what appeals to me. You know, it's particularly good, therefore, are songs, dance numbers, shootouts, you know, things that are self-contained. And then, of course, the excitement is in the edit, connecting these things. You know, if you connect a musical number from an Egyptian film of the 50s, and then you suddenly jump to America in the 50s, a similar musical number, this is where the spark flies. And when you're editing, you're looking for a spark to fly.
I see. But, you know, you can really feel like, you know, the great knowledge that you have about cinema, you know, to do something like that.
Yeah, it's knowledge, I think, yes. I've been watching a lot of films since childhood, you know, and a kind of passion, you know, and a kind of, you want to watch a movie in an uncensored way. You know, the film industry tells you, categorizes films. It says this is commercial, this is art house, you know, this is genre, this is not. But, you know, you should try to watch without those categories if possible, because if you do, then you see unusual things. Like in one of my new films, New Generation, I have Joker and Frozen together. Now they are two very different films, and yet when you set them next to each other, you see a spark flying. So if you can, you know, watching is quite a creative thing as well as making.
Naturalmente il cinema è senza frontiere, quindi riguarderà tantissimi film.
So cinema is without borders, so you watch many films.
E quindi mi chiedevo, anche ricollegando alle domande alla collega, deve mai sforzarsi quando guarda alcuni film, perché in realtà magari lei vorrebbe rivedere film che lei ama e quindi...
Do you ever make an effort because maybe you would like to see again films that you love? instead you get to see other films?
I don't like repeating experiences. If I've been somewhere once, I don't really I want to go somewhere else. And that's the same for cinema. Very seldom will I watch a film twice. You know, some films like Billy Wilder's Apartment I've seen many times, some Imamura films from Japan. Most films I've watched just once. And the reason is there's so much more to see. You know, we will never run out of cinema. And I think that you feel renewed or rejuvenated when you see something new. And that's for me, I want to do something new each day, see something new each day. And that's the case with cinema. And that means that you have the comfort zone of the films that you love, but I don't go there. I go to the discomfort zone, you know, and there are certain, you know, when you see Pasolini Salo once, you don't want to see it again, never. But I would say, but that's a discomfort zone. But I would say that more generally. There are films that I know I won't particularly enjoy, but I need to see because they're aesthetically daring or politically sophisticated. So yes, always pushing into newness, but also a kind of fear, you know, discomfort. You want to get lost. I want to get lost in cinema without a map, not know where I'm going. Autofiction. Autofiction. See?
It's something that is used especially in literature.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
For example, Emmanuel Carrère or Javier Cercas, other authors.
Yeah.
Do you think that you're, in a way, you use the same scheme, the same approach in your work in cinemas? Is a kind of authors of literature and writers that, you know, tries to put in the experiment, watching and telling stories even themselves. So you talk about, you know, you narrate stories through movies history, but you are yourself in these experiments in a way.
Yes, sometimes more than others. You know, the film that's playing here tonight, A Story of Looking, is a self-portrait. It's literally a self-portrait, you know. But I made a film in Mexico City called What Is This Film Called Love, which was something similar. In my own work, I've been charting the aging process. You know, I'm now 56, and I've been looking at aging in my own work. You know, and even when the films seem nothing to do with me, like I've made a film about neo-Nazism and Holocaust denial and lots of films about cities, but they're always grounded, you know, in my experience and my sense of optimism or fear or etc. So yes, that applies. Autofiction, yeah, that's a good phrase. There's a phrase in English I like as well, which is lyric prose. How would you say it?
Lyric prose? Literally prosa lirica.
Prosa lirica, sì. So it's not fiction, but it's got a kind of lyrical or heightened quality. This combination, I think, has been something that I've been aiming for. I don't know if I get there, but I've been aiming for it for a long time. You know, I want to encounter the real world in a film, but I want to see it shaped. One of my favorite writers is Gertrude Stein, the American writer who lived in France for a long time. And she said that imagination is observation plus construction. So you observe something real. The way, I don't know if you can see my T-shirt here, but this is Albrecht Dürer observing a real thing, the wing of a bird. But then you shape it, you turn it into form. And that combination is what I love doing.
Talking about the story of Looking,
Yes.
it's of course a very personal. There you go. Yes, I was going to ask you about it. Okay. So I'm really interested in knowing why did you want to actually share this part of the story with us.
Yes, the central theme in all of my work is looking. It has been for a very long time. At school, I was a bad reader, but I was very good at visual things. So I wrote this book. I thought, why don't I write a history of looking? And in the book, I deal with sport, landscape, all sorts of things. After I wrote the book, I got the eye diagnosis that I had suddenly a very bad cataract. And of course, the filmmaker in me thought, first of all, I was really scared. But then I thought, because looking is a joy, you know, and if you're going to lose that, I also got a macular problem, and I thought, wow, this one of the central things in my life could begin to decline. But then I thought I could film this, you know, and we put a camera in the surgeon's piece of equipment, so you can see the eye being sliced open, the thing being pulled out, the new thing being pushed in, etc. And it became the sort of focal point of the film. And I thought, why not, you know? And when I was having that eye operation, you see lots of visual things and you think of lots of visual things. So this was a very, shall we say, dramatic way of me continuing to consider looking, why it's so beautiful, why it's really good at empathy. When you look out into the world, you can see the problems of others, and you can see they're not as sometimes you're very lucky. Empathy, pleasure, desire, all these things. So it's, I mean, I still as passionate. Like this morning, I was out, you know, looking at Ludovico Carracci paintings, and there's one little Frau Filippo Lippi picture here, you know, seeing that. Wow.
So somehow it's great that you know you actually wanted to share this part of your story, because this can be an example also for other people.
I think so. You know, I mean, lots of people have this particular cataract problem, and it's actually really easy to sort, and my eye's super good, so that's good. But it's also, I'm rubbish at lots of things, but I'm quite good at looking. And if I can take people by the hand and say, come with me into this visual journey, you know, and we'll go in together in some way and share it together, then I can say what I see and how I see, and it can be illuminating for others, I think.
This is a personal question. As I'm a freelance journalist, but I work for a foundation about education.
Oh, yes.
I wanted to, and we always say that the first 6 years are the most important of everyone's life. So I wanted to ask you, looking back from what you are now, from your passion towards cinema and making films, if you, as we are in Biography Festival,
Yes.
If you can tell us if you recognize something in your childhood that led to what you are now, making films and loving
Yes.
cinema.
Almost everything in my childhood I can recognise, yes. You know, I grew up in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and there was a war, a low temperature war, but a war nonetheless. I was a nervous little boy, and as an adult I'm still nervous. But when did I not feel nervous? When did I feel release? When did I feel the unravelling of self? In a movie theatre, in the dark. That has remained the same. It has remained a safe place for me all my life. So that is unchanged. I think, you know, I very much agree with what Pablo Picasso said, that all children are artists. And as you grow up, as you become an adult, you become, you know, you put on a sort of uniform of adult life, you know, and you forget the element of play and how important play is in creativity. In Scotland, Tilda Swinton and I set up something called the 8.5 Foundation, which is for 8.5-year-old children, so a bit older than your category of 0 to 6. But we said that a child's 8.5 birthday, halfway between their 8th birthday and their 9th birthday, is their movie birthday. It's their kind of bar mitzvah. It's their initiation into the world of cinema. And so on that day, you know, we made parties for children, because that's a moment in a child's life when she is, or he is, not yet trying to be cool. You know, they're still open like a sponge, you know. So yes, all that stuff about childhood is, of course, very formative. But for me, I've tried to hold on to those properties of my childhood and not let go. You know, for instance, some people have said things to me like, as a professional, and I say, well, I don't think I'm a professional, you know, I'm a kind of amateur, i.e. a kind of lover of making films.
In questi giorni abbiamo avuto un po' un'apparizione, no? Qua a Bologna è tornato Werner Herzog.
In these days there was like a sort of the epiphany here in Bologna because Werner Herzog came to Bologna.
E mi ricordo nel 2019 gli avevo chiesto se lui avesse un libro che per lui potesse in qualche modo rappresentare una sorta di Bibbia, qualcosa a cui lui poteva tornare continuamente, un po' per sentirsi a casa, un po' per rimodulare la propria mente, no?
In 2019 he had asked him if Herzog had a book which was a sort of Bible for him, a place where he could go home in a certain way and feel safe.
E vorrei fare a Mark la stessa domanda perché Herzog rispose che lui continuava a rileggere Tito Livio di continuo, che è uno storico. E Mark è uno storico e mi chiedo se lui torna a qualche tipo di testo sia di storici del cinema ma anche non di storici del cinema come fa appunto Herzog, perché mi disse che lui vede tipo 2 film all'anno, cioè praticamente il cinema neanche lo considera più o meno. Quindi non lo so, ovviamente loro sono 2 figure molto diverse e questo appunto mi interessa molto perché.
So he would like to make the same question to you. Werner Herzog answered that his book is Tito Livio. So it goes to Latin, it goes back always rereading that if you want to feel comfortable, if it's comfort zone. So he would like to know if there is,
for me,
I don't know, a book or something
that I return to. Can I mention several books? Is that okay? Yes. The first, in general, the writer Virginia Woolf. I have her tattooed on my arm here. I think Virginia Woolf, for me, the way she was a great filmmaker. She never made a film, but she seemed to film her own thought process in a fantastic way. So my first choice is Virginia Woolf, her entire thing. My second book is George Steiner, Real Presence. The reason I mention that is it's about sort of those, we live in the modern world of reproduction and everything is screened and digitized and copied, multiplied. But this book is about sort of pilgrimage, going somewhere in search of the real presence of something. I was brought up very Catholic. I'm not Catholic at all now, but we're taught to believe in the pilgrimage. I still, I go to India, to the village where Satyajit Ray shot a film. I go to the grave of Ozu in Japan. These pilgrimages matter for me. And the third book I would say is Don Quixote of Cervantes, because I think the combination of the Don and Sancho Panza sort of covers most things. The mad dreamer and the cynic, these kind of combinations together, I find it a very funny book and an infinitely enriching book. And so did Orson Welles.
You talked about the fact that you consider yourself as an amateur.
Yes.
And do you think that does exist something like professional viewers, critics?
That's a good question.
And common audiences. Because many times nowadays we're talking about what it means to have a knowledge of something. How would you say something that is I would say more important, more relatable, more general, than other people. And do you think that critics and film critics has the authority of saying things differently, or nowadays all these kind of social attitude of viewing things, we've got images all around, from social to TikTok to Instagram movies and TV series. It gives another approach to what it means looking at things.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the idea of professionalism. For example, if I have surgery, I want it done by a professional medic, you know. But in the creative field, we need to question these things a little bit more. We need, as I've touched on earlier, we need to believe in the idea of the uncensored in order to, you know, access the kind of unconscious material, the kind of volcanic magma in our heads. And the audience has to do that as much as the filmmaker, I think. You know, so it's, you know, I don't know if you feel. I can feel myself giving into a film. Sometimes it's 30 minutes in, sometimes it's 40, and I think, okay, I trust you now. Here we go. I will be open and let you play my emotions like a violin. So I can choose to do that. On your question about critics and TikTok, etc., I think every one of the critics, you know, have to keep informing themselves. You know, people who just want to say, I know nothing about this, but here's my burst reaction. That's fine, you know. But we also need to value the idea of cinema as an art form, which has got a history, a tradition, a complexity, which rewards study and analysis. You know, both as individuals, but critics really need to do this. You know? And if critics haven't seen the films of Zurlini, if they haven't seen the films of Djibril Diop Mombeti, if they haven't seen the films of Oshima in Japan, you know, then they're still working up to the ability to talk about cinema fully, I think. You know, and there's no shame on that, you know, it takes a long time. It's a lifetime's journey to watch this stuff. But we have to keep on the journey. We certainly can't think, okay, I've seen enough now. I've seen German films of the 70s, American films of the 70s, I've seen Scorsese, I've seen Bertolucci, I'm done. You can't do that because we know where that leads. It leads to the exclusion of loads of people, particularly female filmmakers.
We haven't seen, or at least I haven't seen yet, the story of Luke Haven.
Okay.
And yes, how did you have this idea? Why did you start from your surgery on your
Yes.
eyes, and what did you develop?
I said something about this when you were frozen, but I'll certainly say it again. Yeah, I mean, looking for me has been probably the central thing in my life, along with walking. You know, looking was the property of being alive that most excited me. And when I started to have a problem in this left eye, I was really scared. But the filmmaker in me thought, I can chart, I can document this process, try to be honest about this fear, and see what happens, you know, go through a journey. And in the film, it's one of my most personal films. I cry in it, I'm naked in it. It was made during lockdown. And so I had intended to travel around the world to film visual culture everywhere. And I traveled nowhere. I stayed in bed. It was like a Kafka story or something like that. And I thought, and it's often interesting creatively if you do the opposite of the obvious thing. The obvious thing was to travel around the world. What if I travel nowhere and make a film about visual culture? You know? And it was a valuable process for me. I think it's won more prizes than any of my films, you know, which is strange. And it was a slightly painful process because I was so vulnerable. When you're doing any creative endeavor, you have to learn how to avoid banality, avoid the obvious, you know, and that's always tricky, and that's what I tried to do in this film.
So I'm going to ask you about the other movie that is going to be shown here at the Biography Film Festival, The Storms of Jeremy Thomas. So I was wondering, why did you want to actually tell about Jeremy Thomas? So how did the idea started?
When I was a teenager, I sought out really daring films, you know, violent, sexual, just anarchic films. And quite often a name appeared on them, and that name was Jeremy Thomas, not as director but as producer. You know, the films of Bernardo Bertolucci, of Nick Roeg, of David Cronenberg, of Oshima, of many of the radical auteurs. There was Jeremy's name. You know. And I began to realize that a producer can be an auteur as well. You know, and then the more I researched, I realized that Jeremy often originated these projects. He would buy the book, or you know, he was obsessed by Ballard, the writer, for example. And again, Jeremy was pushing to make a daring kind of cinema like Crash, or like The Last Emperor, or The Naked Lunch. And of course I was in awe of him, and then producers came to me and said, would you like to direct a film about Jeremy? And I said yes, but I like not to use conventional methods if possible, and so I said really no interviews, or very few interviews, and I knew that he drives to Cannes every year. And I thought, what if we do Thelma and Louise? What if he and I drive to Cannes together in a car, just stay in the car, no camera outside, just stay inside, and try to make a kind of kaleidoscope of images from his films and the films that have excited him. And that's what we tried to do. So very simple, two people in a car, but then all these intercut with all loads of images. And what I discovered, the central discovery, was that Jeremy thinks that we all have a secret box in our head, and inside that box are those things that we dare not admit to our friends. Jeremy, as a human being, is lovely, gentle, generous, and yet he makes films about people who are violent, destructive, etc. That's the secret box. You know?
Yes, I see. Yeah. Anyway, the idea of the car is absolutely great, like, because yes,
it's very simple, but we made it for zero budget,
Yes.
zero budget. But I wanted to, challenge the film industry assumption of the director auteur.
yes,
Like if you notice the posters for my films, etc., it never says a film by Mark Cousins. I don't, because my producers and the editor and things. So I wanted to get the sense that Jeremy's central role. That's why I did not try to interview Cronenberg or Stephen Frears or any of these people. I wanted Jeremy's perspective.
yes. Actually, that's something that captured my attention yesterday while I was watching the story of film. Like your voice seems like the soundtrack of the movie. Like so.
Should we wait until they come back?
Yeah.
Let's come back. I always put the microphone really close to my lips.
Yes, that's right.
And just pop screen there, that thing. So I don't want to shout and boom like I'm giving a lecture. It needs to be really intimate, and I want you to feel as if I'm just beside your ear, talking to you alone. To have a kind of gentle feel. I don't want to. Shouting, I think, is tiring, and for something like that, you want to kind of create a slightly hypnotic feel, almost something. That's what I'm aiming for, at least. I don't know whether it gets there, but that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. That's the way in which you carry the audience by the end.
Yeah, and I think the combination of a really big screen and a really gentle voice works for me.
Yeah.
I think that contrast works well.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's true. Yeah.
Well done.
Yes.
Yes, I see that you have many, and I understood that every of them has a meaning for you.
Or a pleasure, yes. Yeah. They're like stigmata. I mean, they're reminding me of the things that I love. It's either, so the first time I've been to Milan many times, but I finally went to the Last Supper, and I saw it. And I was not prepared for how beautiful it was, so I immediately came out and got Leonardo there. But I have Farouk, she's a great Iranian filmmaker. Kinyo Tanaka, she's a great Japanese filmmaker. Marie Curie, because I studied science.
Okay.
And so Marie Curie, of course. I always think, if in doubt, what would Marie Curie do? Because she was so driven, So a lot of them are filmmakers or architects or places.
That's beautiful.
It's just fun, and it's also, earlier I was talking about rejuvenation, you know, by watching films. You know, you sort of could transform yourself by this kind of thing. You know?
That's true. That's true.
Loads of people have tattoos in Bologna.
Yes.
Far more. I suppose
That's
Bologna's a
true.
punkier town than I've just been in Rome and Cinecittà, and you know, not as many tattoos at all as in. I suppose it's a studenty city.
Yeah,
I
probably.
It
Yes,
is,
it's
yeah.
a university town.
Yes.
So yeah.
The oldest university in the world.
Yeah, in the world. Yes.
But with lots of young people, so
Yes. But it's interesting, you know, that I'm asking you this because somehow you communicate with your body as well. you
Yeah,
know, so.
yeah. I mean, I think that cinema is very good at bodies. You know, like the body of Marilyn
were saying
Monroe, the
that,
body of Charlie Chaplin. You know,
Yeah.
it's very good at that. It's very good at physical stuff. You know, and if you're a visual person, which I am, then it is a way of communicating. Yeah. Although, it is a way of communicating. And when I go to India, for example, it's a starting. This says Kagaz Ke Phool, a film directed by Guru Dutt. And when I go to India, that's a starting point for a conversation because they are sort of amazed that a European person knows this film. And I know it and absolutely love it. So it's a way of kind of carrying an international flag or something like that. I don't know how to put that.